Hello, dear friends. All my life I have been nostalgic for the retired life, like the poet Fray Luis de Leon or Horace, or like the lamas of Tibet. And now my utopia is being fulfilled with the Back to Nature movement brought about by the health crisis. When the Roman Empire fell, the population took refuge in the countryside, and now the same thing is happening with the fall of the system, but with technology that facilitates remote work and household appliances that facilitate comfort at home. Opinion piece. Brain drain to countryside. Seeking freedom in rural life. The countryside attracts teleworkers. Back to the countryside with computer and Wi-Fi. The profile of the nomads is very varied. Digital nomads, the new workers. The health crisis is encouraging a return to the countryside. Empty Spain is filling up with inhabitants. The return to the countryside means the end of the system. Back to nature is a philosophy or way of life. This facilitates the repopulation of abandoned villages. People returned to the countryside when the Roman Empire fell. Rural life is necessary to maintain ecological balance. The counterculture of the hippies touted the return to nature. Going to the countryside has always been an ideal of escape to good life. Let's start. The claustrophobia produced by the house arrest of the health crisis in the big cities has increased the desire for freedom of rural life, and the mass exodus to the countryside of those who can work remotely, called teleworkers or retirees, who want to retire to the tranquility of rural life and improve their quality of life. The social system is transforming, and it seems that new types of alternative life are emerging more and more noticeably. Greenpeace has just stated that rural life is vital for maintaining ecological balance. Rural municipalities contribute up to 20 times more than urban ones to maintain biodiversity and avoid the destruction of ecosystems. So, they need an urgent strengthening as their role is vital, according to a report published by Greenpeace. Exodus to the field. The Industrial Revolution moved our great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents to the big cities. And now the process is being reversed, because today it is impossible to live in the countryside with the same technological comforts as in the city. Humans are a species genetically adapted to live in small rural communities rather than in monstrous cities, according to the Naked Ape by Desmond Morris. The book describes that human behavior largely evolved to meet the challenges of prehistoric life as hunters and gatherers. Throughout its pages, you can read a lot of data based on studies, which explain to a large extent the globalized behavior of human beings. Forced confinement has caused many families to consider moving to the peripheral areas, and the possibility of future confinement may reinforce this trend. The health crisis is representing a radical change in the way of working. Many companies that were forced to implement teleworking, adapting their work processes and routines, have now discovered its advantages. In addition, confinement has pushed many young professionals who had left to pursue careers abroad to return to their home countries. Confinement generates the change of perspective in the population. which tends to look for a home away from the city, and is encouraged to plant vegetable gardens. Being confined at home, people seek their own activities and entertain themselves by planting a vegetable garden or keeping chickens. There is a wave of homeless families who are willing to repopulate empty Spain. There are people fleeing from the overcrowding of the cities who want to make a change now, immediately, without waiting. These spaces are also an alternative to repopulate the populated, lonely and depressed villages in many regions of Spain. Back to nature is a philosophy or lifestyle that emphasizes closeness to nature, rather than artifice and civilization. Artifice. In this, the rustic customs of country life are preferred to urban fashion and sophistication. A famous example is Henry David Thoreau, who spent 2 years living in a simple life in a log cabin on Walden Pond and wrote his famous autobiographical book called Walden or Life in the Woods in 1854. Opportunity. It is an opportunity for a generation or part of a generation to at least have the option to begin to generate these economic and social connections in a rural setting with a young population, which relates in these population groups and can give rise to new dynamics. We may also have new opportunities that we have not seen so far. In the urban world, moving to the countryside has always been an ideal of escape to the good life, and never has the city imprisoned us as much as during the health crisis. Some have already chosen to escape. Taking advantage of the telecommuting opportunities brought about by the health crisis, many workers have returned to the village in so-called empty Spain, where they spent their summers as children. They settled in the house inherited from their parents or grandparents, where they combine ancestral forms of heating with fiber optics, or buy a house at a lower price than in a big city. Interest in rural life has grown with the rise of empty Spain, and with the promotion of rural tourism and the new, more leisure lifestyle, which is committed to a return to the oranges and organic food and local products. Improvements in infrastructure and telecommunications and the possibility of teleworking in some cases have also contributed to this. Rural world. Rural Spain now figures in the media in a different way than it did years ago. The headlines are no longer so much about the events and tragedies that occur in the villages, but about the demands of this extensive Spanish territory, about the new narratives coming from the rural environment, about the eruptions in politics of movements that give voice to forgotten provinces, and yes, also on the lists of the most beautiful municipalities that citizens long to visit. The rural world used to imply a total lack of knowledge, a lot of insecurity, and now it doesn't. In the last time, we have noticed more demand in what is the rural area, far away from the big cities. There are people who buy a village, several buildings with land where they can set up businesses, or large families can move, either for retirement or for a business that has not fitting. Then there are the small villages houses or charming hotels, which are used for living and for renting as a rural house. In almost all these cases, the house goes together with the land, because people want to cultivate their agriculture products in the same place, without displacements. They highly value the local businesses and it's a luxury to have a quality raw material. Demand. In mid-April, the real estate portal Idealista published a study where it states that during the first 3 weeks of confinement, the demand for housing moved from the capitals to the provincial municipalities. Specifically, the capitals now concentrate 38.8% of housing searches compared to 44.1% in January, according to this report, which reflects that interest in properties far from the capital has increased in all Spanish provinces. During the 40s, many Spaniards have realized that they live in a house they don't like, and they would prefer to live in less central areas in exchange for more square meters, more light, gardens and terraces. In addition, the good performance that teleworking is having in many companies is possibly also pushing many professionals to consider establishing their residence in small towns away from large urban centers. The profile of nomads is very varied, from married couples and elderly people to young self-employed people who do not know where their business is going to go. This business in singular is going to go. Who want to open other companies, invest in another way of living, in another quality of life, I suppose. There are also those who dreamed of a quiet retirement in the countryside and have decided that the time is now. People who are fleeing to overcrowding of the cities, who want to make a change now immediately without waiting. Back to the land movement. A back to the land movement is any one of several agrarian movements throughout different historical periods. The common thread is a call for people to adopt small holdings and grow food from the land with an emphasis on a greater degree of self-sufficiency, autonomy, and local community than is found in a predominant industrial or post-industrial way of life. There have been a variety of motives behind such movements, such as social reform, land reform, and cyber war efforts. Groups involved have included political reformers and counterculture hippies. The concept was popularized in the US in the early 20th century by activist Bolton Hall, who established homesteading on vacant land in New York City and wrote many books on the subject. However, the practice was strong in Europe even before that time. During World War II, when Britain faced a Nazi U-boat blockade, a Dig for Victory campaign urged civilians to combat food shortages by growing vegetables on any available land. In the United States, between the mid of the 60s and 70s, there was a resurgence of the Back to the Land movement, with significant numbers of people migrating from cities to rural areas. My grandparents and uncles planted potatoes during the Spanish Civil War in order to eat because of food shortages. The Back to the Land movement has ideological ties to distributism, an attempt in the 20s and 30s to find a third way between capitalism and socialism. American poet and social commentator Gary Snyder has recounted that there have been back to the land population movements over the centuries and around the world, largely due to the emergence serious urban problems, and people felt need to live a better life, often simply to survive. Urban historian and philosopher Jane Jacobs commented in an interview with Stewart Brand that with the fall of Rome, city dwellers returned to inhabit the rural areas of the region. Eco-village. An eco-village is a traditional or intentional community with the goal of becoming more socially, culturally, economically, and ecologically sustainable. An eco-village strives to produce the least possible negative impact on the natural environment throughout the physical design and supportive behavioral decisions of the residents. It is consciously designed throughout locally owned participatory processes to regenerate and restore their social and natural environments. Most range from a population of 50 to 250 individuals, although some are smaller, and traditional eco-villages tend to be much larger. Larger eco-villages often exist as networks of smaller sub-communities. Some eco-villages have grown throughout individuals, families, or other small, like-minded non-member groups, at least initially, who settled on the periphery of the eco-village and participated de facto in the community. Agrarism. Agrarism is a political and social philosophy relates to the ownership and use of land for agriculture or that part of a society or economy that is tied to agriculture. Agrarianism, as agrarists with typical advocate on behalf of farmers and rural communities. Although there are many schools of thought within agrarianism, a historical characteristic of agrarians has been a commitment to egalitarianism, with agrarian political parties typically supporting the rights of small farmers and poor peasants against the wealthy in society. The philosophical roots of agrarianism include European and Chinese philosophers. The Chinese school of agrarianism was a philosophy that advocated communalism and peasant utopian egalitarianism. In societies influenced by Confucianism, the farmer was considered an esteemed productive member of society, but money-making methods were looked down upon. This influenced European intellectuals such as François Quesnay, and avid Confucianist and advocate of China's agrarian policies, and the formation of the French agrarian philosophy of physiocracy. The physiocrats, along with the ideas of John Locke and the Romantic era, formed the basis of modern European and American agrarianism. Basic principles. Some scholars suggest that agrarianism values rural society as superior to urban society and the independent farmer as superior to the paid worker, and sees agriculture as a way of life that can shape ideal social values. He stresses the superiority of a simpler rural life over the complexity of urban life. For example, M. Thomas Inge defines agrarianism according to the following basic principles. 5 principles. First one. Agriculture is the only occupation that offers complete independence and self-sufficiency. Second one. Urban life, capitalism, and technology destroy independence and dignity, and foster vice and weakness. Third one. The agriculture community, with its fellowship of labor and cooperation, is the model society. Fourth one. The farmer has a solid and stable position in the world order. He has a sense of identity, a sense of historical and religious tradition, a feeling of belonging to a particular family, place and region, which are psychologically and culturally beneficial. The harmony of its life restrains the intrusion of a fragmented and alienated modern society. Fifth one, the cultivation of the land has within it a positive spiritual good, and from it the cultivator acquires the virtues of honor, manhood, self-reliance, courage, moral integrity, and hospitality. They are the result of direct contact with nature, and through nature a closer relationship with God. The agrarian is blessed because he follows God's example in creating order out of chaos. I have always thought that it is impossible to lead a spiritual life without having contact with nature, which is the marvelous work of the Creator. Short news. Russia orders troops to return in Ukraine. Russia announced Thursday that it was ordering troops to return to base from the area near the Ukraine border, apparently calling to an end to the build-up of tens of thousands of troops that had alarmed the West. Trump says refusing inoculation would be deranged pseudoscience. In an email sent to supporters Monday, former President Trump slammed those who say no to injections. According to Trump, there is no reason for anyone to skip the syringe because all drugs carry some risk. In quotes, taking a precautionary approach is deranged pseudoscience, in quotes, according to the ex-president. California vehicle emissions regulation withdrawn. The Biden administration said Thursday that it is moving to withdraw a Trump administration rule that sought to prohibit states from setting vehicle emissions or zero emissions vehicle mandates. Biden targets tax rate as high as 43.4%. The president will propose nearly doubling the capital gains tax rate for wealthy individuals to help supposedly pay for a large amount of social spending. Stock market plunges. Major U.S. stock indexes suffered a drop on Thursday, following reports that President Biden plans to tax capital gains of up to 43.4% for the wealthy. Chile's Senate approves the third withdrawal of private pension funds. Chile's Senate approved Thursday in general the third withdrawal of pension funds bill. The initiative had 31 votes in favor, 11 against, and 0 abstentions. Massive death of salmon in Chile. More than 5,600 tons of salmon died in farming centers in the regions of Aysén and Los Lagos in southern Chile, and its marine biodiversity is now in danger. The cause? The so-called brown tide. According to the authorities, it is a natural event, although specialists assure that the salmon industry is also responsible. Do self-help books help? After more than a year of confinement, social distancing and economic crisis has caused psychological sequels in many people who have resorted to self-help books to alleviate their discomfort. Technology. First, 100% Spanish submarine. The 80.8-meter long vessel is built entirely in the Cartagena shipyard. One of its maxims is discretion, and it can't remain immersed under the sea for more than 2 weeks, although its main strength may lie in the design of its propeller, a secret delicately kept by the engineers to avoid copying. It is already common to create rain with artificial clouds. It is already common for countries like China, US, and Cuba, among others, to generate artificial clouds to make it rain to avoid hail and snow, and to avoid fog and pollution. Cloud seeding is known as weather manipulation. Excuse me. Machine learning helps researchers decipher Dead Sea Scrolls. Researchers used machine learning to identify textual patterns within the text of a Dead Sea Scroll and to study the Great Isaiah Scroll, which some researchers hypothesized was written by 2 scribes with similar writing styles. Company sells sex robots or clones of dead patterns using 3D modeling technology. Sex robot company Luxbotics offers a clone of dead patterns using state-of-the-art 3D models. In addition, Luxbotics offers ultra-realistic humanoids to satisfy the carnal needs of singles with no other recourse. The company's flagship adult companion model, named Stephanie, cost $6,000. Researchers at the Institute for Bioengineering of Catalonia have succeeded in developing biological robots or biorobots using muscle cells, and have made them capable of swimming at unprecedented speeds and self-training with a 3D printed intelligent skeleton. This breakthrough opens the door to a new generation of stronger and faster biological robots based on muscle cells and bioengineering science. The bursts of white electromagnetic light at the Schumann resonance have been intensifying throughout April. I suddenly feel leaden, sleepy and aging. I check the chart and indeed large bursts are being recorded. Happily, when the burst of light ends, I am filled with exhilarating energy, as if I am celestially connected. We are absorbing and acclimating to the higher and higher 5D divine light. Personally, I am euphoric. I feel lighter and lighter in body, mind and soul. Homo sapiens survived because of creativity genes. An international team of scientists led by the University of Granada has identified for the first time a set of 267 creativity-related genes that acted as the secret weapon to prevent Homo sapiens from becoming extinct. The research presented this Wednesday at the University of Granada shows that creativity was the secret weapon of Homo sapiens and its advantage over Neanderthals in survival. A biomechanical model shows that the Tyrannosaurus rex was just as slow as a human being. Due to its anatomical peculiarities, the giant carnivore had to walk at a man's pace to avoid wasting energy. The natural walking speed of Tyrannosaurus was 4.6 kilometers per hour, a figure similar to that of humans and other mammals. Security camera records baby velociraptor in Florida home. A woman in Florida, USA, has caused a stir on social media after claiming to have recorded a baby dinosaur running across her lawn in the middle of the night. Christina Ryan said her security camera captured the moment of a mysterious two-legged creature ran past her Palm Coast home. Astronomy. Record-breaking flare detected in Alpha Centauri. The closest star to the Sun is a red dwarf called Proxima Centauri, where astronomers have detected one of the most violent flares seen in our galaxy, and the most powerful coming from it. Space debris is an urgent issue. The head of the European Space Agency on Tuesday defined the problem of space debris as an urgent challenge to an international conference where several experts warned of the risks posed by debris to satellites and spacecraft. Space debris is one of the most pressing issues regarding for future in space, said ESA's new director, Joseph Aschbacher, a German one. NASA to develop satellites to identify pollution sources. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has joined a project that would develop special satellites that could identify super emitters of air pollution. NASA said in a statement that its Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, would provide an instrument that would be integrated into the satellites. The galaxy and harmonic resonance. Fascinating physical proof of ascension. We know that the Sun is actively pumping out spiral waves of energy that propel the planets and moons into their respective orbits. The planets are spaced in natural musical proportions to each other. Each star is pumping out energy, waves that create similar planetary systems, as this type of resonance obviously couldn't be caused by random clumps of gas and dust. The galaxy is tuned to form DNA. In the optimal planetary system, where there are no major cataclysms or disruptions, there is a specific distance from the Sun where the smallest spiral waves will gather the natural materials of a planet from the DNA molecules of life. The DNA is the wave, and the wave is the DNA. That DNA is formed in the process of a planetary evolution may seem ridiculous, but it can be effectively proven by something known as the DNA phantom effect. Dr. Vladimir Proponin put DNA in a tube and shone a laser through it, and to his surprise found that it actually captured the light and spun it spiraling throughout the helix, as if it were a crystal. It was even more amazing when Dr. Proponin removed the DNA and the light continued to spiral on its own. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friend, and be happy.